And those questions are pretty well-defined questions. They are empirical questions we could principally bring an answer to. There are a lot of anecdotes. There are this one, which is bed nets used as fishing nets. It's a picture that was in the malaria journal, so it's all peer-reviewed and all that. So this is the kind of Easterly Dambisa-Moyo argument. You were going to see the bed net used as fishing net or wedding veils or what have you. And then this is the other argument that of the bed net being, the other anecdote of the bed net being nicely hanged in the room and the child, the healthy child who slept in there under the bed net. So that's not too helpful. So we want to go further than the anecdote. There are many anecdotes and they cut both ways. And so how do we go further than the anecdote? So the first thing we could do, so suppose you were entitled, suppose you were given this job. I tell you, find out for me whether people who get their bed nets for free are more likely to use it as fishing nets or more likely to use them as bed nets. And also find out whether if I distribute the bed net for free, I distribute many more of them or I distribute the same amount. What would your first response to what you should go out and do? Yeah.
I would find two similar communities and then implement it both of them, or like give bed nets for free one, and maybe help someone start a small business of selling bed nets to the other.
So you would take two similar communities, and in one case give bed net for free, and in one case start to sell them, maybe by finding a small business or maybe importing them to the village. What would be an even, we'll go back to that, what would be an even easier, even more immediate way to do it that we could think of to start with if we needed to do this quickly? Yes?
Just look at communities where this is already in place.
Right, you would look at community where this is already in place, and you would say, well, in this community, the bed nets are given for free, and in this community, the bed nets are sold. So let me try my thing. Yeah. In this community, the bed nets are given for free. In this community, the bed nets are sold. First question, do I see more bed nets where the bed nets are given for free? Second question, do I see the bed nets more likely to be used as fishing net in those communities? So that's, I think, what most people would, that would be your initial instinct. The problem you would have if you did that, as opposed to sorry, can you remind me your name? Sif. The problem to do that, as opposed to do what Sif suggested, is that it's to know why some community happen to be the one that got them for free and some community happen not to have the free distribution. So let's think of one reason why there might be a if you were to start a free bed net distribution program somewhere, where would you start it? You have a country and you want to start a free bed net distribution, what would you pick? Yeah.
There's like a particularly bad increase or something.
Right, you would try to pick a place where there is a lot of malaria, presumably, right? And maybe a place where people are very poor. So let's pick the example let's work with the example where you would pick, to start your free bed net distribution, the region where there is a lot of malaria. That would make sense? So if that's the case, free bed nets are distributed where malaria is a huge problem, then in these places, even if they had to pay for the bed net, they might have purchased them more willingly than in places where malaria is not such a big problem anyway, because the private benefits of having a bed net is higher in those regions. So this is what we call the counterfactual, which is what would have happened in the place where the bed net got distributed for free if they had actually been sold. So let's look at it in a form of simple graph. So suppose we have we are going to do the argument for purchase, and the same kind of discussion we could have for use. So suppose we have two regions, the high malaria region and the low malaria region. And suppose that God told us, this is how much how many people would buy BedNet, or the fraction of people who would buy BedNet in the high malaria region and the low malaria region if the BedNet are not subsidized. And this dot is higher because since malaria is more of a problem, people are more willing to buy BedNets, okay? So that's what we would have if BedNet were expensive. And if BedNet were free, we would have those ones. So compared to the previous dot, they are higher. Why are they higher in both regions? Because they're free, so you're more likely to get something free than to have to pay for it. But they are still higher in the high malaria region, because why would you get a BedNet in a region where malaria is not a problem? You really don't need it. If you don't have a fishing boat, you don't need the fishing net either. So they are still higher in the high malaria region than in the low malaria region when BedNets are free. So this is what God would have given you. But sadly, God didn't give you that. God gave you either this point or that point. What you observe is the purchase of BedNet in the area where they are given for free, and the purchase of BedNet in the area where they are expensive. And those regions are different because one is high malaria region and one is low malaria region. So what you observe is the demand for BedNet when they are free in the high malaria region, and the demand for BedNet when they are expensive in the low malaria region. And what you don't see is those guys. What you see is this and this. What is the true effect of price on purchase in the high malaria region? Where do I find it on the graph? That's the vertical thing. That's the true effect of free versus expensive in the high malaria region. And this is the true effect of free versus expensive in the low malaria region. So this is the true effect. That's what I'm looking for. Sadly, I don't have this and I don't have this. So I'm not in very good shape. What I do have is this and this. So if I just did the comparison that we started with, we would say, we would compare the high malaria region purchase when it's free to the low malaria purchase region when it's expensive. Take the difference, that would be our effect. So is that the true effect? Is that biased upwards or is that biased downwards? Is that too big, too small, or the right effect?
Too big.
Too big. And we can see it here, which we can re-put. We can say, well, suppose we had what God would have given all the numbers. In the low malaria region, this is the effect of price and purchase, and the rest is the bias. In the high malaria region, this is a true effect of price and purchase, and the rest in the bias is the bias. So if we knew this and this, we could calculate the effect, and we calculate the bias that we would get if we compared this to this. But sadly, we don't have those. So what this is saying, in other words, is that when we compare the purchase, or how purchase when it's free to purchase when it's expensive in the high and low malaria region, we combine two effects. We combine the fact that even at the same price, the purchase would have been different. So the counterfactual would have been different. Those are this versus this, and this versus this. And the fact that there is actually an effect. So that's why it's not a very good answer for the question we're asking. If you get the two region, two prices example, then this one is the same, but with 4 prices. Now we have 4 regions. A region where we give them for free, a region where we give them for 10 shillings, a region where we give them for 20 shillings, a region where we give them for 30 shillings. And this is what I observed in reality. Very steep slope. At 30, almost no one buys it. But this is due, again, to 2 things. One is that that's expensive, so even if malaria was a real problem, people would be less likely to buy them for 30. And in addition, those regions where people had to pay a lot of money for malaria is precisely because malaria is not such a big problem in those regions. So in order to decompose those two effects, what I'm doing is that I'm playing God, and I'm telling you, this is what the demand at various prices would have been in this first region, in the 0 region, in the high malaria region. So this I don't see in reality. In the real world, I don't see that. But this is what it would have been. And it's a little flatter than this one, because this is like the bias. This is saying these are places which are not very, which don't really need malaria. And this is the effect of prices. This is the yellow one is a true effect of prices. And the vertical lines are the bias that are added by the fact that prices are expensive in places where BetNet is not very useful because malaria is not so much of a problem.